Okay, assalamu alaikum. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Now, today we are going to, yeah, please rejoin. Yeah, Galaxy S9 Plus. I do not have the time to rename you guys. So please leave and then join with original name. Because, you know, if something goes wrong during the meeting, I will first of all remove the ones with the fake name. So, you know, you will suffer. This has happened before. So I don't want that happening again. Okay, so we will talk about specialized cells today. Okay, page number 10 in my book, and I don't know the page number in the new book. So this page is what we're going to discuss. Okay, so what do we mean by specialized cells? Now, in our body, cells, when they are newly formed, they're like baby cells. I've used the word baby cells, and they are undifferentiated, meaning like, you know, like they are normal ordinary cells. They have, you know, like they have all the organelles in the process of being formed, but they have not really specialized. You know, you can think of it as when you are in your primary grades, you study all the subjects, right? Science, math, English, Urdu, Islamic studies, this, that, all the subjects. But as you enter grade 8, then you are asked to choose. You either take biology or you take ICT, right? So people who are interested in, you know, going into computer technology, they drop biology and they choose ICT. Why? Why is that? Because they want to spend more of their energy and time into the subjects that will be more useful to them, right? Because they don't want to waste their time on a subject that they won't be pursuing in the future. Right. So, so as you grow, you specialize. And then, you know, people who have opted for biology, they study biology, physics, chemistry, all the science subjects till, you know, their A levels. And then at A levels, again, within biology, they have to choose, like, you know, in what branch of science do you want to choose? Do you want to go into engineering? Do you want to go into biochemistry? Do you want to go into medicine? And then those people who want to go into medicine, they take then, you know, only biology. And so they specialize in biology. Then biology has further branches, and, you know, it goes on and on and on. And so you are narrowing down your subjects and you're narrowing down your specializations. Isn't that how it is? So when you are children, you are studying all the subjects. Now you are studying all the subjects, but none of those subjects are in depth. They're not in too much depth. Just introduction, just the basics of geography, basics of history, basics of this, basics of that, but you don't specialize into it. Now, but when you grow up and when you go into higher studies, you specialize, you go into greater depth, into greater detail. So same is the case with these cells. When they are baby cells or when they are stem cells, they can perform all the functions or all the jobs, but at a primary level, not that specialized, okay, to some level, and that's it. But then they further mature. They mature and they get specialized to do one particular job. Okay, for example, some of these stem cells might specialize to become nerve cells. Others might specialize to become muscle cells. Just like some of you, when you grow up, will become doctors, will become engineers, will become, you know, architects, or, you know, become other things. So in the same way, these cells are specialized to become nerve cells. Some cells are specialized to become muscle cells. Others are specialized to become red blood cells. And yet others are specialized to become skin cells. And there are many other specialized cells, but I have listed only 4. Same way in plant cells. These are animal cells, right? These are the cells in our body. What about the plant cells? In the same way, same story in plant cells as well. And we have stem cells, undifferentiated cells, but they further mature and they specialize to do particular jobs, right? So some of them will specialize to become xylem cells. And I hope that you have come across the names of these cells. You have come across these cells in your grade 5. So xylem cells, phloem cells, root hair cells, and palisade cells. Now, palisade cells, I think you have not come across before. Palisade cells are cells in the leaves of the plants, and their job is photosynthesis. Their job is photosynthesis, okay? So if you have not come across this word before, note it down right now. This is your introduction to Palisade cells. These are the cells where photosynthesis takes place primarily. So their first job is to carry out photosynthesis, and they are found in the leaves. Remember, leaf is that site within the plant where food making takes place. That is photosynthesis, making of the food. Right, so now when these cells specialize, what happens? What happens? What do we mean by specialization? They, now some structures they need, some structures they don't need, all right? For example, let's take example of a cell trying to become a nerve cell. Now, in order for a cell to become a nerve cell, it will require some structures, but it will not require the others. So the structures that it does not require, it will get rid of them completely. And it will only retain the structures that it requires. And it will develop more of those structures that it requires. And the reason why it is getting rid of the unwanted structures is because so that it can save space, it can save energy, it doesn't have to make those structures. And so it will only make and it will only spend energy in the structures that it requires. Okay, so let's start. Let's start with a particular examples of some specialized cells. Let me take the page out. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about plant cells first, because your book is talking about plant cells first. So let me follow the book and let me talk about the plant cells first. Now, I hope you guys have done the basic parts of plants in grade 5, right? The basic parts are in the leaves. First, let's start from the top. Leaves that make the food, right? Food making cells, or you can call it the food factory. Or you can even think of it as the kitchen of the plant, you know, kitchen where you cook food. So this is where they cook food. Okay, this is like their kitchen of the plant, okay, where they make food. Then there's this transport system, and there are 2 tubes, okay? Excuse my drawing, I'm not too good at drawing, but you know, I guess you get the main idea. There are 2 tubes. One is taking this food that is made by the leaves to all the parts of the plant, okay, including the roots or whatever other branches or whatever other parts there might be, flowers, seeds, fruits. I have not made those. And the other tube is taking the water up, because water is required to make the food, right? And there are other things which are required to make food. We will discuss that in another chapter. So these are different types of cells. These cells must be specialized in making food. These cells must be specializing in transporting, right? Now talk about this part of the plant. These are roots, and we all know, we have done this in grade 5. Their job is to absorb the water and the dissolved minerals. The minerals which are dissolved in the water, they absorb it. So that's their job, root, okay? So now the cell which is responsible for this function will be specialized in this particular job. The cell which is making this tube will be specialized in the transport job, right? And so on and so forth. So let's take these 4 major types of cells and let's discuss them, okay? Let's talk about the food making cell first, which is the Palisade cells, right? You guys ask questions before I even go to that part. You guys ask questions before I've even mentioned that part. Hold on, you know, have patience, bear with me, okay? I will check the chat window at the end, because I cannot be in the middle of my lecture checking the chat window and answering the questions. So let me, you know, finish some part and then I will answer your questions. So let's talk about the food making cells. Right now, just be observant, listen to me and absorb, okay? Because many of these things might be you might be coming across them for the first time, and I know it's a lot of information. So just sit back, pay attention and try to absorb as much as you can, okay? Food making cells are called the Palisade cells. That's their complicated scientific name, right? And their job is to make food. So now, before let me ask you a few questions. Which structure do you think for making food? Which structure, which organelle? Remember we did organelle? First of all, tell me, what is an organelle and what organelle do you think this particular cell should have? Because its job is to make food. Yes. So because this cell's job, okay, Iman Asim, tell me. Yes, Iman, tell me in the chat window. Answer me in the chat window. Chloroplasts co-admit, okay, chloroplast. Yes, good job, Sidra. Good job. Yes, chloroplast. And then what is in the chloroplast? Manal AK. I'm talking about organelle, and you mentioned leaves and flowers. Leaves and flowers are not organelles. Okay, what is an organelle, by the way? Who will tell me what an organelle is? Yes, chloroplasts are filled with chlorophyll. Now, chlorophyll is a green pigment. It's not an organelle. What is an organelle? Okay, good job, Momina. What is your question? Momina Binte Noman. What question did you ask before? The difference between eukaryotic and prokaryotic is also about cell wall. But plant cells are classified as eukaryotic cells, and then why have a cell wall? Why plants have 7 cells and animals have 6 cells? Why it is not the same? What? Yes, please tell me, what is an organelle? Okay, Momina Binte Noman, a eukaryotic, prokaryotic. The only difference is that eukaryotic cells are highly specialized cells, and prokaryotic cells are they're like less complicated, less complex, less mature, less advanced, and a eukaryotic are more complex and more advanced, and so that their organelles and their structure is more complex and well developed. Whereas prokaryotic are simple. Okay, they are simple, they are not complex, they are not advanced. Okay, so no need to get confused. That's the only difference, and therefore you will see differences in their level of in their level of complexity. Yes, Sidra, very good. Examples are nucleus. Nucleus is an organelle. Chloroplast is an organelle. Mitochondria is an organelle. Ribosomes are organelles. Remember, these are the organelles we have discussed so far. So organelles are like the small structures which are found within the cell, okay, within the cell, inside the cell, which have particular functions to perform. Okay, so they are inside the cell and they are structures. And then you guys are correct that the organelle that this cell might need because it has to make food is a chloroplast. Remember, it's a chloroplast, not chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is that green pigment which is inside the chloroplast. Chlorophyll is not an organelle. It's not a structure. It's a pigment. It's a liquid. You know, like it's a pigment. Okay, it's not a structure. Okay, so now, how are these Palisade cells specialized to perform this function? They have lots and lots of chloroplasts. They have the most chloroplasts of all the plant cells. Of all the plant cells that there are, Palisade cells have the most chloroplasts. And all those chloroplasts are packed with chlorophyll. Okay, I will show you their pictures. I'm sharing picture. I'm sharing my screen. I'm showing you Palisade cells. Okay. So can you see the elongated or the vertically arranged cells? These are Palisade cells, and you can see that they form, if you start from the top, if you start counting the layers of cells from the top, they are the second layer. Okay, because I cannot annotate my screen. So I cannot pinpoint it, but if you start counting the layers of cells, I'm enlarging it, okay? So if you count the number of layers of cells from the top, the second layer, in which you can see rectangular cells arranged vertically. Rectangular cells arranged vertically. These are Palisade cells, okay? Now the top layer is absolutely transparent. Transparent, why? So as to allow all the sunlight to fall. I cannot see. You guys cannot see? Oh, sorry. Okay, let me check what's the problem. Okay, let me share again. I'm sharing again. Okay, can you see now? Can you see my screen now? Urva, you can? Please tell me. And please do not message me through WhatsApp to answer me. Use this chat window. While I am taking a class, I don't check my WhatsApp. Don't message me during the class. Oh yeah, now you can. Okay, so now, I'll explain again. So when you start counting the layers of cells from the top, the second layer in which you can see rectangular cells arranged next to each other, the rectangular cells arranged next to the top layer, okay? They have lots and lots of chloroplasts arranged around their vacuoles. Yeah, those cells are Palisade cells. And this, by the way, is a cross-section of a leaf. This is a cross-section of the leaf. What do you mean by cross-section? Cross-section is like, you have cut the leaf and you have taken a section of it, and now we are looking at it and we have like zoomed inside using maybe an electron microscope, right? So these rectangular cells with chloroplasts within the cytoplasm around the nucleus are the Palisade cells. Now, the top layer is transparent so as to allow as much of the sunlight to pass through as is possible. Okay, and why is this rectangular shape and vertical arrangement useful? Now, this is useful because you see, these cells have to maintain a balance. They need sunlight to make food, but they also don't want to get damaged by excessive heat or by excessive sunlight. So they have to maintain a balance. So this vertical arrangement allows them to absorb as much sunlight as is possible, but at the same time, if the intensity of sunlight gets too much, these chloroplasts can move below, or they can move, like deeper away from the sunlight to protect themselves. So this arrangement gives them that. And this also allows them easy access to sunlight, right? And they have a thin cell wall so as to allow the movement of oxygen and carbon dioxide through. Because remember, for making food, they also need carbon dioxide, right? And they must be respiring. So carbon dioxide is being produced. So that gas also needs to move out. So in order to facilitate that, they have thin cell wall, right? Okay, this is a diagram of a single Palisade cell. So look at the basic parts of this cell. You have the cell wall as any plant cell, followed by the cell membrane, and then you have cytoplasm with the chloroplasts, and then you have nucleus on one side. Why is it to one side? Because of the big, large vacuole which has pushed it to one side, right? So this is a plant Palisade cell diagram, okay? And it is usually rectangular, okay? Okay. So these were Palisade cells. Now let's move on to the Xylem cells. Now, what is the function of Xylem cells? Xylem cells are the tube cells that I just showed you in my diagram. Where did that diagram go? This diagram. The xylem cells are responsible for taking the water from the roots to the leaves. Now let's look in detail what xylem cells look like. Now their job is to take water. So before we study its structure, before we study its structure, we should know the job. That will help us in understanding its structure, because the structure is heavily dependent upon their job. Okay, their job is to take water from the roots to the other parts of the plant that need that water, right? So its job is transport of water. So what structures will it need and what structures will it not need? It turns out, okay, this is one job, there's another job. They also provide support to the whole plant. You know, xylem is usually found in the bark of the trees or in the main stem of the plant. And it is the stem which is responsible for giving that upright posture to the plants. So xylem is responsible for that support. Why? Because its cell wall is very thick. It has a very thick, in fact, this cell has the thickest cell wall. Xylem cells have the thickest cell wall, so much so that cell wall is made up of, now cell wall is made up of what material? Who revised? I mentioned in my first class, cell wall is made up of what? What is that substance that the cell wall is made up of? Yes, Momina Binte Noman. Yes, Manal AK, cell wall is made up of cellulose. Very good, Abdul Rafi. Yes, cell wall is made up of cellulose. But in case of xylem cells, the cell wall is made up not only of cellulose, but another substance, which is, who remembers? The cell wall is made up of cellulose as well as another substance that gives it a lot of strength. No, Sidra, no, not sap. Sap is that liquid within the vacuole. It is made up of lignin. Lignin is a material which is waterproof and it is highly strong. You know, have you seen the bark of the trees, how hard it is? You know, so hard that we make furniture out of it. We make tables out of it. That hard thing is what? It's made up of cellulose plus lignin. Okay, it is waterproof, meaning it. So you can think of xylem vessels as like big, sturdy, strong water pipes. Okay, they are like water pipes and they are so strong and thick that they also perform the job of a skeleton. Okay, so like, you know, support rod as well as water pipes. Subhanallah, Allah has given like these two functions to these xylem cells. Okay, now because the transport is like, you know, they're like behaving just like water pipes, they don't need to be like live cells. So the cells eventually die. So when they are baby cells, they're like living cells, but as they mature, they have a lot of deposition of cellulose and lignin on their cell wall, so much so that the cell membrane degenerates, the cytoplasm dies away, the rest of the organelles like ribosomes, mitochondria, this, that, whatever they have, everything goes away. All these is because these cells don't need them. They don't need them. All they needed was that, you know, surrounding strong structure which could behave as a pipe through which the water will be transported, right? So they get rid of all those structures, and what is left behind is just a strong pipe made up of cellulose and lignin. Okay, so cells are dead, all the living parts of the cells die and degenerate, and no cytoplasm, no organelles, no cell membrane, only cell wall. I'll show you the picture. Why? Because their job does not require any you know, any energy requiring process. They don't need to have any processes, you know, that take place within the cytoplasm, like respiration or protein synthesis or this or that. They don't need to carry that out. That's not their job. Their job is to just transport. So they will get rid of all these other structures. Okay. Yes, Atika, that spelling is correct. Okay. Now let me share. I want to show you xylem. I want to show you xylem. Let me, yeah. Okay, this is a diagram Let me show you. Okay. So on the left side, can you see? On the left side, follow the labelings at the bottom. On the left side, the two tubes on the left side, which are like hollow tubes. Hollow tubes, there's those two tubes are xylem, right? So can you see that they are made up of only cell wall, and that's it. You don't see any cell membrane, you don't see any cytoplasm, you don't see any nucleus, you don't see any organelle. I'm talking about the left two tubes, which are labeled as xylem. Please follow the labelings at the bottom of the picture. Okay, so this is a diagram of xylem, and then the left tube, I'm talking about xylem right now. The left tube, can you see it's just a tube? Simple tube. You will not see any nucleus, any mitochondria, nothing. Okay. Okay. So that was xylem. Now let's move on to phloem. Okay. Let's move on to phloem. Now phloem again is another tube, but it varies in the fact that it does not transport water like xylem, but it transports glucose. It transports sugar, not glucose. I'm sorry, that's a mistake. Okay, transport the, not glucose, it's some other sugar, but I will not mention the name right now because I don't want to confuse you. But yes, it transports sugar in the form of a solution, a real thick, not that thick, but yeah, somewhat thick sugar solution, right? Now, this transport of sugar solution in itself is an energy requiring process. Transport of sugar solution is an energy requiring process. So therefore, phloem cells cannot be dead. Just like xylem cells could be, but they cannot be. Okay, they have to be alive. Okay, but at the same time, they're also performing the same function of transport, right? So they do need space for the transport. So they cannot afford to have a lot of structures, but they will have a thin cytoplasm to keep the cells alive. And because the cytoplasm is so thin, they cannot have a lot of processes going on in their cytoplasm. And so the processes will be very minimal, okay? And they will have companion cells, you know, like a secretary. The secretary does the job, and, you know, like so that the, you know, the boss can have more time to do other things. So in the same way, phloem cells have their secretaries, and they are called companion cells. So companion cells have all the organelles and structures. They do the job of, you know, making proteins and respiration and giving energy and nutrients to the phloem cells so that the phloem cell can be alive and can do the job of transport. So phloem cells, because of the companion cells, phloem cells can transport as well as be alive. Okay, so now, how do these xylem and phloem cells mature? How do they develop? Now when they were stem cells, both xylem and phloem cells, now they had to make tubes, right? So the baby cells are arranged this way, you know, in the form of a stack, one on top of the other. Okay, but they have to now develop into a tube, right? So what happens is that this part degenerates, you know, the cell wall in between this part degenerates. This part is cut off. Degenerate means like withers away, falls apart, no longer there, dies. Okay, so this part goes away, and then what we are left behind with is a smooth tube. Not that smooth, something like this, I would say, something like this, something like this, something like this. Now, what are these? What are these tiny projections inside? These are like the leftovers of the cell membrane that existed when they were babies. These are like the leftovers. So this shows that the cell membrane was here. Cell membrane was here, but then the cell membrane got degenerated. So what you're left behind with are these, you know, I don't know, indentations. Okay, and I'll show you the picture and you'll understand. Now, these indentations are found in xylem, but in phloem, This whole cell membrane cannot degenerate because these are living cells, remember? So they do need cell membrane and they do need a thin layer of cytoplasm. So they cannot get rid of the whole membrane altogether. So they do maintain their membranes, but they are pores. They are pores. These pores allow the transport of this sugar solution. They have pores. So these membranes in between the cells do not degenerate completely, but they only develop pores or the holes, you can say in easy language, which allow the sugar solution to be transported from one cell to another. Okay, and by the way, the direction should be downwards, coming from the leaves downwards. So sorry about that. Okay. Okay, so I hope I'm making sense to you guys. And so these phloem cells are joined by companion cells. Now, these are companion cells. These are companion cells. And you know, as the name suggests, they are the companions of phloem cells, and they have all the organelles. You will see the nucleus, you will see the mitochondria, you will see ribosomes, and all the organelles will be there. I'm just gonna show you a picture. And they can carry out all the processes real well. They can make proteins, they can carry out respiration and everything. And then after making all those proteins and everything, they will give, and there are pores in between the companion cells and the phloem cells. And through those pores, all the nutrients and all the molecules, and you know, like oxygen and everything can be transported to the phloem cells. Now let me share my screen. Okay. I want to show you the phloem cells. Now look at the tube on the right-hand side. Same diagram on the right-hand side shows phloem. So can you see from the right-hand side, the last column is of the companion cells. And as you can see that the companion cell cytoplasm is filled with organelles. Can you see ribosomes? Now ribosomes, what was the function of ribosomes? Yes, to make proteins. Remember in the last class I mentioned, in last class, ribosomes function is to make proteins. Now what are proteins? Why is it important to make proteins? All the structures are made up of proteins. Okay, everything, cell membranes have proteins, nucleus is made up of proteins, everything, all these structures are made up of protein. Protein is the building material. Proteins are the building materials for organisms, most of the organisms. Okay, so these are the ribosomes. So these are all the organelles within the cytoplasm of companion cells, and you can see the nucleus, right? And then just adjacent to the companion cells are these phloem cells. And as you can see, in between these cells are these perforated, or you know, a cell membrane with holes. These are called sieve plates. Why are they called sieve plates? Sieve means छाननी, छन्नी नहीं होती जिससे आप चाय छानते हैं या कोई भी चीज छानते हैं. Why is it called sieve? Because it has holes. So similarly, these plates which are in between adjacent phloem cells have holes in them. So they look like sieves. So that's why they are named as sieve plates. Okay. Okay. So this is how a phloem looks like, and these are their companion cells. Okay. And in between the xylem and phloem is this other tissue. We won't discuss it for now. Okay. Okay, let's look at the phloem vessel here. You can see the perforated plates, the sieve plates here. You can see the holes, and you can see the food going in both the directions, downwards as well as upwards. Why upwards? Downwards, I understand, from the leaves to the other parts, but what about upwards? No, because there are some leaves which are a little at a lower height, and they have maybe made food and sugar, and then, you know, flour is at the top maybe. And so that flour would also need, right? So the sugar solution can travel in any direction, not necessarily downwards. It can be, you know, upwards as well, in both the directions. Okay. This is also another picture for xylem and phloem. Yes. Okay. Okay, this is another diagram. So can you see xylem on the left side is like a tube, and you can see little projections inside. These are the leftovers of the degenerated cell walls and the cell membranes between adjacent cells, and then you have phloem on the right side, and then these are the sieve plates in between the adjacent cells. And you can see the companion cells as well on the right side of the phloem, right? Okay. Okay. Yeah, this is another picture for xylem. Thick walls containing lignin and remains of the end walls, and the water is being moved through the tubes. Okay, and this it allows for the smooth movement of water through this tube. Okay, this is phloem tube carrying dissolved sugars up and down the plant. Okay, so you can see up and down, both the directions. Okay. Okay. Now let me see what questions do you have, and then we'll move on to the root hair cells. Lignin humera is also a material. It's a name of a substance. It is very strong and it is waterproof. It does not allow water molecules to pass through it. And that is what is responsible for the strength and hardness of the wood. Okay. Do all plants have stems, same cells? Do all plants have same cells? They can vary in in finer details, but yes, overall the basic structures are the same. Okay, basic structures are the same, and it also depends upon their function. Okay, and of course there are variations from plant to plant, from cell to cell, depending upon what environment they're living in. Of course, hot country plants will be different from cold country plants. Desert plants will be different from the polar plants, and so on and so forth. I mean the plants that grow in the tundra region, and so on and so forth. Okay. Do all cells have companion cells? Phloem only has companion cells, Arsalan. Phloem. Okay. If phloem dies, then will the plant die? Yes, most probably yes. Yes, Ali Hassan. Why do humans do not have a nucleus? Miss, how does the body get rid of unwanted structures? Unwanted structures just degenerate. Okay, they just degenerate. Does xylem have companion cells? No, xylem do not have companion cells. Why? Because they're dead. They don't need. The reason phloem has companion cell is because it wants to live. Okay, it has to live, because in order to transport sugar, it needs to have energy. And for anything to have energy, it needs to respire. Okay, to get energy, it has to respire. Okay. They want to take some food to the leaves as, okay, because some leaves are at the top of the plants. I don't know, the veins of the plant. Yes. Can any plant live without any of these tubes? Well, yes, there are plants which live without these tubes. Then they have other adaptations to meet their requirements of water and food. And that's a very good question. So yeah, you do have plants where they don't have stems at all. Like moss and ferns. Moss and ferns, they grow along the ground. They do not have any stems, so they do not have any of these tubes. These are the most complex plants that we're discussing, the flowering plants. We're talking about flowering plants right now. Okay, root hair cells. Okay, root hair cells. Now, what is the function of root hair cells? And then let's talk about the structure, how structure satisfies the function. Their first job is that they anchor the plant to the ground. Okay, that's very easy to understand. The roots, because they're deep down into the ground, they make sure that the plant sticks to that spot on the ground, right? Second is that they absorb the minerals which are dissolved in water, right? So again, what is the function? Absorb. What does absorb mean? Absorb is like sort of a transport, like movement of substances from one site to another, from one area to another across some surface. Okay, so what does absorb mean? Like if this is soil, like if this is soil, if you have soil here, and then so the water or the minerals will be moving from one area to another, to a new area across a surface, right? That's what we mean by absorption. And this is energy requiring. This requires energy. So that means they cannot be dead. They have to be alive. Now, keeping this job in mind, that they have to absorb minerals from the water. I mean, they have to absorb water and minerals from the soil. What structure do you think they should have? And what structures do you think they don't need? Think. What structures do you think they need? And what structures do you think they don't need? Please answer my question. What structures do you think the root hair cell needs, and what structure do you think the root hair cell does not need? Yeah, Mariam Afzal, very good. They need vacuole. They need root hair, very good. They need, okay. They need root hair. Okay, why are you saying hair? Why are you saying hair? What will the hair do? What will the root hair do? What will the root hair do? Yes, my camera is off. Please answer my question. Yes, Sidra, yes, they do need the nucleus. You guys are asking so many questions and you are not answering my question, and you're just asking, you know, like bombarding me with questions. You have so many questions, mashallah, in your minds. Okay. So because they have to absorb, right? So let's talk about the structures that they need and the structures that they don't need. So yes, they need vacuole, they need a nucleus, they need the cell membrane, they need the cell wall, everything. Why? Because they are carrying out a function which requires energy. What they don't need is, what structure they don't need? Who read the chapter before attending the class? Yes, very good. Abdur Rahman, Momina Binte Numan, chloroplast is what they don't need. Mitochondria, Qadar, mitochondria is responsible for supplying energy. They need energy for this absorption. So they will have mitochondria, okay? They need lots and lots of mitochondria because they have to carry out this energy requiring job. Their job is very energy demanding. So they do need mitochondria. They have mitochondria. But because the roots are underground, they're not exposed to sunlight. So even if they had chloroplast, they wouldn't be able to photosynthesize. So what's the point of keeping the chloroplasts here? So roots, you will see, are never green in color. Roots are not green in color. They are whitish or maybe brownish, I don't know, but they are not green, okay? So can you see the green color stops where you have the ground? Reason being, you don't have any sunlight reaching these areas. So there is no point of having chlorophyll or chloroplast here, right? So that is one organelle these root hair cells do not need. So they do not have a chloroplast. So if a question asks you, all the plant cells have chloroplast except for dash. So that dash will have root hair cells. Or if the question asks you, do all the plant cells have chloroplast? True or false? So that's false because root hair cells don't have chloroplasts, right? Right. Other thing that is important for root hair cells is that because they have to absorb something from one region to another across a surface, across, you know, a border, or, you know, therefore, greater the surface, faster this absorption, right? Greater the surface area you provide for this thing to happen, faster it would take place. For example, if the root hair cells did not have any hair, let's suppose, if the root hair cells did not have any hair, and, you know, I just gave these arbitrary numbers, you know, these random numbers. So for example, I mean, this is just for explanation purpose. If I add them up, what do I get? I mean, this is area. This is area, okay? Meter square. Area of this surface, area of this surface, area of top, and this is area of the bottom. So if I add all of them up, I get 28. But if I add this hair extension, so it has all those surfaces plus the surface of this hair. So the total area is larger. So 4 here, 10 here. And so I gave like 1 here, 2 here for the hair, 4, 4, and then 10, 10, and then 2. And then if you add up, you'll get 48. So you can see how the hair extension or the, this extension increased the surface area. Okay. Now this is called the root hair. This is called the root hair. And this whole cell is called the root hair cell. The cell carrying this root hair is called the root hair cell. Now the vacuole will also extend, okay? The cytoplasm will also extend. Cytoplasm, vacuole, cell sap, everything will extend into the root hair. Okay, except for the nucleus. Nucleus can't, nucleus will stay here. Okay, and remember, this extension will only be on the surface which is sticking out into the soil. Now you will not have root hair on both the sides. I mean, in case if both of them are exposed to the soil, then that might be true, but only the surface which is exposed to the soil, only the side which is exposed to the soil will have this extension. Look at the figure on page, in your book. Okay, if you cannot see my screen, look at the picture in your book, page number 10, according to my book. So this other surface is facing the other cells. So it doesn't make sense for it to have root hair extension. So only the surface which is facing the soil will have this extension, okay? Because it needs to absorb. It needs to absorb the ions dissolved in the water, okay? So now let me show you pictures of root hair cells. Can you please take out the next? Okay. Yeah. This is the root, and can you see the fine root hairs sticking out? White colors, these hairs increase the surface area of the root so it can absorb water and dissolve minerals more effectively. So this is the root and these are the root hairs, okay? Can you see the tip does not have any root hair? The tip does not have any root hair. And we will discuss in detail later why the tip does not have root hair, because the tip is the one which is growing, into the soil. So it's growing. So if it had root hair cells, the root hair would get damaged. So that's why the tip, because it's growing, does not have the root hair cells. You don't have to go into that much detail at this point, but I just want you to familiarize yourself to all these structures and cells, because you are many times, even in grade 6, required to recognize different types of cells. So when they give you, and we will do a few questions. So if you look at the diagram, you should be able, by just looking at the diagram, you should be able to identify that, okay, this is a root hair cell, this is a Palisade cell, this is a Xylem cell, this is a phloem cell. So this is how the root hair cells look like. So can you see the root hair extensions are sticking out only on the surface which is facing the soil, right? On the left side, you have the actual light micrograph, and on the right side, you have the diagram, okay? And you can see the vacuoles, you can see the nucleus, you can see the root hair cell extension, right? Okay. Okay. Let's see. Okay, then let's talk about the bone cells. These are, I mean, you don't have to go into the details of these bone cells and muscle cells. These are real complicated. And I will just talk briefly about, I will just show you pictures and we will talk briefly about their functions, okay? I don't think we will do bone cells or muscle cells in detail at all in IGCSE, in O levels at least. Maybe muscle cells in A levels, but in O levels, but bone cells, no, not at all. So bone cell, the main cell is called osteocyte, and there are 3 different types of cells in bone. and their job is to make and break the bone. Make and break the bone. Break, why break? The bone which has grown old or has been damaged or is not being used by the body is broken down. So there is constant regeneration and degeneration of the bone going on that is responsible for the growth of a person and, you know, the age related changes. So the basic function of bone is support, to give shape to our body, to give form to our body. And its basic function is the movement, right? The reason why we can move is because we can move our bones. And why can we move our bones? Okay, this is another, I mean, this is individual bone cell. These are all the bone cells together, how they arrange themselves together. And this is one single bone cell alone, okay? Then let's talk about muscle cells, okay? Muscle cells' job is to contract. Okay, remember, they only contract. They do not elongate or extend or stretch. Some children do that mistake. They only contract, and their contraction causes movement of the bones to which they are attached. Okay, so muscles are attached to the bones, okay? And when these muscles contract, that causes movement of the bones. And movement of the bones causes movement of the limbs, because of which we can move. Okay, so that's all you need to know. So of course, these cells will have the structures that are required for their functions. And the structures that they do not require, they don't have. And the shape of the cell will also be according to their function, what they require, the shape that will help them in performing their job. Okay, now let's talk about egg cell. These are all the different types of cells which are mentioned in your book. So I'm discussing them real briefly. So these are the egg cells. Now, egg cells are the female reproductive cells, which contains the female genetic information, which is required to make a new cell, a new baby cell, okay? So that's all you're required to know. And its adaptation, so that's their role. The role is to provide genetic information to the new cell, the baby cell, right? And the other function is to provide nutrients to the baby cell, okay? So that is why it is so big, because the cytoplasm is filled with nutrients, a lot of glucose and proteins and, you know, fats, which will be required for the growing baby. Because when the baby grows, it, you know, because it's making new cells, it's growing, it requires a lot of nutrients and energy. So that's the job of the egg cell. So that's an electron micrograph maybe of the egg cell, same egg cell, okay? You can see the big nucleus at the center. You can see the mitochondria, because, you know, it is carrying out energy requiring processes. So it has mitochondria, okay? And it has other structures which help it in its function, okay? This is a light micro, I don't know if it looks like an electron micrograph to me, okay. Okay, and then let's talk about the male reproductive cell as well, which is called a sperm cell. And its function is the same, which is to provide genetic material for the new baby cell, which is going to be formed, okay? Okay, then I want to talk about red blood cells. Red blood cells are the most important. Red blood cells are the most important cells when it comes to IGCSE. Red blood cells function is, because I have 10 minutes left, I cannot ask questions. I will just jump on. Red blood cells function is to transport oxygen, okay? Transport oxygen to and from the lungs. They transport oxygen to the cells from the lungs, and then they transport carbon dioxide from the cells back to the lungs. Okay, not all the carbon dioxide is transported this way. Some also is transported in some other way. So how does its structure help it in performing this function? The thing is that, again, red blood cells are performing a function of transport. Again, transport is the function, right? It does not require the nucleus and the other structures again. So it gets rid of them, okay? Well, It does need nucleus, but because it is more important to have more space for oxygen, therefore it, you know, gets rid of the nucleus so that it has more space to accommodate more hemoglobin. Hemoglobin, maybe it's a new word for you guys. Hemoglobin is that protein which is found within the red blood cells, which is responsible for the red color of our blood. Okay, and it carries oxygen molecules. Okay, hemoglobin is responsible for carrying the oxygen molecule, and this hemoglobin is found within the red blood cells. Okay, and because the red blood cell has gotten rid of its nucleus, it carries oxygen. It is biconcave in shape. Let me immediately get to the picture because it's easier for you to understand if you look at it while I'm explaining you. So let me, picture of red blood cell. Okay, where did it go? Here. Yeah, these are how red blood cells are. Can you see that they're like donut shaped, except for that they don't have a complete hole in at the center? So they have a pit at the center or a dimple at the center, which gives them that biconcave shape. Okay, this shape is called biconcave. This shape is called, this is another view. So this is how they look sideways. Can you see that they're just like donuts, but except for that they do not have a hole, and instead of a hole, they have a pit at the center. Okay, now the significance of this shape is that it increases the surface area for the entry of oxygen molecules. So more surface area is available for the oxygen to get inside the cells, and you know, the other way. So because the job is transport. Now it does not have mitochondria. It does not have other organelles either. Again, the purpose is to have more space, maximum space for maximum hemoglobin and oxygen, because that is more important. Now, because they do not have nucleus, they cannot live for long. Okay, an average red blood cell survives for only 120 days. 120 days. After 120 days, they degenerate, they die, and then bone marrow, which is the soft central part of the bone, makes new cells. Okay, the soft central part of the bone makes new cells. And so after every 120 days, which is like 4 months, we get new red blood cells made by the bone marrow. Okay, so I know that's a lot of information, bombardment on you guys, and you must be full of questions. I do understand that, but because of lack of time and this online thing, I'm sorry I cannot interact you that much. But you are most welcome. Let me check the chat window. What questions do you guys have? It has hemoglobin inside it, so that's how they transport the oxygen. Yes, Sabiha Azhar is asking, don't the muscle cells relax? Yes, the muscle cells relax. Why not? They do. You're not all the time contracting them, are you? Okay, so Abdullah Khan, I have a question. Yeah, please ask. Egg cells can be what? Okay, text size too small. What sperm cells? What is Haversian canal? Don't have to follow the labels of all the pictures that I'm showing you. The reason why I'm showing you those pictures is that so that you know how they look like. Okay, nothing more than that. Why is the nucleus in the root hair? I thought they couldn't go into the root hair. What? Nucleus is required by the root hair because they are live viable cells. They are carrying out an energy requiring process, which is the absorption of minerals and water, and so they need the nucleus. Okay, and the nucleus does not get inside from anywhere. It was there when they were maturing. Okay, it was already there. Okay, why does the tip has a different color? It has a root cap on it. Okay, so okay. Okay, so we will continue. We will do end of chapter questions, and we will continue in the next class. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.